You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And joining me on today's cricket discussion is Australian cricket fan and regular listener of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast, Jehan. And in this cricket discussion, we're going to discuss Australian cricket and take a look back on the year that was for Australian cricket and have a look ahead to the future as well. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jehan. Jehan, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Jack. I'd like to say that I really enjoyed the chat that we had. I was probably around this time last year where we went through a number of topics about cricket and Australian cricket in particular. I'd like to say thank you for having me back for hopefully another captivating chat.
Yes, it's my pleasure, Jehan. And we had a great chat this time last year. And for those who may not know, me and Jehan had a chat on Australian cricket last year where we talked about many topics. We talked about great Australian cricket teams and players. We talked about Australia's failures overseas. We talked about the transition phase with the Australian team in all three formats. We talked about Australia's chances in the Cricket World Cup in 2023 and the T20 World Cup this year in 2024. We talked about Test cricket in Australia. We talked about domestic cricket in Australia. And we talked about the future of Australian cricket and what the game looks like in Australia going forward. So those are some of the topics we discussed in our last discussion this time last year. So if you want to go and watch that, you can. And that's available on the YouTube channel, of course, on the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast YouTube channel. You can click the playlist and go and watch those episodes that we did on Australian cricket with me and Jehan. But for our second discussion, Jehan, with potential topics to discuss, and it's a long list. A bit of a heads up for everyone. This is going to be a marathon. So strap yourself in and sit back with the popcorn and munch away because it's going to be a very long discussion because there's been a lot of cricket over the last year for Australia in many formats and tournaments and lots of things to discuss. So we're going to be talking about Australia's Cricket World Cup campaign from last year. They're successful because they won. The Australian summer from last year, 2023-24. We're going to be talking about the Australian Test team and the ongoing transition, new players, potential retirements, and all that stuff. Australia's T20 World Cup campaign from 2024 this year in the Caribbean and the US. Obviously, Jehan was over there watching the games in the Caribbean, and he'll give us some good insights on that when we come to that. And then we're going to be talking about David Warner, one of the most controversial figures in Australian cricket, I think many people would say. And then we're going to be talking about Australia's recent tour to Scotland and England for the T20 and ODI series. And we're going to preview the Australian summer coming up this year, 2024-25, which will see Pakistan and India coming out for a few ODIs, T20s and Test matches. Then we're going to have a look to next year's Ashes series here in Australia. We're going to be talking about that. The last series was so captivating. This series, people cannot wait to see what will happen under the new direction of England, and can Australia contain baseball in their own backyard. And then we're going to be talking about white ball focus for Australia. Should they focus more on ODIs or T20s going forward? And then for our last topic of this discussion, goals for Australian cricket in the next few years to see, what sort of goals and ambitions Australian cricket has going into the future. So there's a lot to discuss and talk about, as I've just mentioned from those topics there. But nonetheless, we're going to have a good time discussing these topics, Jehan, and get your thoughts and insights and some of my thoughts as well on Australian cricket over the last year and looking ahead to the future as well. So it's going to be a great chat. So let's get into it, Jehan, and to start off our second discussion, on Australian cricket, let's talk about the successful World Cup campaign that Australia had last year, Jehan, in 2023. Australia just know how to win World Cups, do they? Number 6 out of 8 finals is pretty good. A couple of runners-up finals there that they had Australia over the years in World Cups, but they've won 6 out of the 8, which is pretty good. Considering that they were 0-2 to start the tournament with huge defeats to India by 6 wickets and South Africa by 134 runs. A lot of fans, including yourself, Jehan, thought that the campaign was over after the first 2 games. But they won 7 games on the trot to qualify. Then they won 9 to win the whole thing, which is pretty amazing when you look back on it. And, they saved their best 2 games for last, the semi-final against South Africa and the final against India. And the highlight in those 2 games were Australia's fielding. Outstanding. In those 2 games, their fielding was outstanding. A contrast to earlier in the tournament where they had a few problems, a few misfields and drop catches here and there. And there were many highlights as well, Jehan. Glenn Maxwell's 200 against Afghanistan, Travis Head's 100 in the final. The game against New Zealand went down to the wire when Australia won by 5 runs. Australia's form was up and down throughout the whole entire tournament. They had problems with the batting and bowling. And also before the tournament too, they lost those ODI series to South Africa 3-2 in the best of 5 and 2-1 to India in the best of 3 in the lead up to the World Cup last year. But they managed to get the job done, and they always find a way. So, Jehan, how would you assess Australia's, Cricket World Cup 2023 performance and campaign? How would you rate it pretty much a year on since Australia won the tournament?
Well, I think it was a fantastic win. When you look at Australia's one-day record, they've been, I would say, pretty dominant since the mid-90s, probably. A lot of the subcontinental teams are always up there as well in one-day cricket. But my impression was that I think they were the number 1 team in one-day cricket from when they won in 99 up until 2015. When they won the World Cup at home. And they didn't get past the quarterfinal in 2011, but that was in India in subcontinental conditions. The team probably wasn't as good as it has been in that period around that time. But by 2015, they pretty much gone back to being their dominant best. But I think what happened is after 2015, I think they sort of took their foot off the pedal when it came to one-day cricket. There were a number of tours after that. I think I remember after they won that World Cup, they had a tour of England where they won, similar to the recent series, actually. They won that series 3-2 in a pretty good away win. And then after that, I think they had a number of tours there was a whitewash in South Africa, whitewash in India, I think. I think they lost to India at home. And they just weren't as dominant as they were, as they had been for so long in one-day cricket. And then there was a horrendous tour, I don't know if you can remember, of England in 2018, where they lost 5-0.
All too well, yes.
I think
very disastrous.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think Tim Payne was captain. They conceded 485 or something like that.
At Trent Bridge, yes. Yeah, they did.
And I don't know if you can remember, but the team that was humiliated at the 2015 World Cup was England. They got hammered by Australia in the opening game. They got hammered by Sri Lanka. They lost to Bangladesh, which knocked them out of the World Cup. And then they decided that they had to do something about it. And it was a bit frustrating for me because I felt like England, after 2015, England were on their way up and Australia were kind of on their way down, and somewhat unexpectedly. And then they had that, I think coming up to the 2019 World Cup, I think they thought they need to turn their fortunes around. And I don't know if you remember that great series win in India, from being 2-0 down to win that series 3-2 just before the 2019 World Cup. And then they came into the World Cup and played reasonably well, but unfortunately came unstuck in the semi-final. But I think since then, especially in the last 2 years, probably from about 2022 onwards, I think they really have focused well on their one-day squad. And there has been a focus on one-day cricket. They've been consistent with their selections. They've had a certain game plan or formula. part of that has been, I guess, for that top 4 or 5 to really go hard in the power play, which is something that they had done really well. So actually coming into the World Cup, I felt that they were the best team, and I thought that they had a very good chance of winning it. They were ranked number 1. They were, I think, from about 2022, so 2 or about 18 months leading into the World Cup, they pretty much won every series that they played at home. There was a couple of winter series against Zimbabwe and New Zealand, 2-1 against Zimbabwe, 3-0 whitewash against New Zealand. There was a 3-0 whitewash against England. That was just after England won the 2020 World Cup. So I don't think a lot of importance was given to that, but it was a very, very dominant win. There was 278 or something like that partnership between Travis Head and David Warner at the MCG during that series. And that's when I thought, these guys have got a real chance here because they're really building a good team here. Then they went to India, and after they lost the Test series, they won the one-day series after being 1-0 down. And yeah, at that point, I thought, yeah, they've got a really good chance of doing well in the tournament. I thought that they played way too many warm-up games leading into the series. So in September, they went to South Africa. They played some T20s and then a 5-match one-day series. Then they went, just before the World Cup, they went back to India and played another 3 against India, which I don't really understand why they did that. They only played them 6 months previously and won that series.
Yeah.
And then after that, they had practice games as well. So it all seemed a little bit, I don't know, to me, it seemed a little bit unnecessary. And I think especially during that South African series, they dominated the T20s. I think the first game was a low-scoring game. They looked in the...
Yeah, they only won by 3 wickets in the first game.
Yeah, they were in a little bit of trouble, but then there was a big partnership between Marnus and Ashton Agar to get them over the line. The second game was dominating win. And then it was all going well until the third game. And South Africa batted quite well. They got over 300. Australia leaked a lot of runs at the death. But even so, they only just got over 300. Australia looked like they were going to chase it down. And David Warner was batting really well. He was on I think he got to 75 or something. And then he just randomly, I don't know if you remember this, he randomly got run out and he lost his shoe.
Yes, he did. Yes, he lost his shoe. Yes.
And then ever since that moment, they just completely collapsed. They lost that game. The fourth game was one of the most horrendous bowling displays I've ever seen. I think they conceded something like 200 runs in the last 15 overs, something ridiculous like that, with Heinrich Carson completely going off. And to be fair, they weren't exactly at full strength in that series, but yeah, from dominating South Africa, they ended up losing that series. Then they go to India, lose that the series before the World Cup. But then you sort of think to yourself, well, okay, it's not going too well, but it's a World Cup. Once they get started in the World Cup, they'll get back to their best. And that first game against India, on a typical slow, low, bit of a dust bowl in Chennai, balls gripping and turning during the heat of the day, and they sort of struggled against the spinners, got a middling score, and then under the lights, I think the ball just came on, and it was a lot easier for India the ball was just coming onto the bat. But even then, they had them 3 down. I don't know if you can remember, and Kohli went for a hook shot, and Mitchell Marsh dropped the catch. They would have been 20 for 4. Not to say that they definitely would have won that game, but it would have been a lot closer. It ended up being a comfortable win for India. And then they go on to play South Africa. Again, not a great bowling display. And they fielded terribly as well in that game. They dropped a lot of catches. I remember Stoinis dropping an absolute sitter towards the end of that game. And I've kind of also felt that the fielding in recent times has been a real barometer of how well Australia are playing as a team. Yeah, and then there's trying to chase down over 300, and I felt that Steve Smith got a bit of a dodgy decision. I'm not sure if I agree with the Hawkeye from memory. And yeah, and then they end up losing that quite comfortably. And then at that point, I was thinking, okay, this is not going well. This is not going well. And I think they had a key game against Sri Lanka that they had to win, and again, they didn't get off to a great start. Bowlers were leaking runs. I think they're 125 off the first 20 overs, not getting any wickets. And then Pat Cummins came in and bowled an incisive spell. David Warner took a great catch on the boundary. I think running would have been from square leg to mid wicket. I think diving catch to get one of the Sri Lankan openers out. And then
it was an outstanding catch from memory as well.
Yeah. And
that was the turning point in that game.
That was the turning point. Yeah. I think that was the turning point because they collapsed after that. They won that game. Then they batted really well against Pakistan. I think Warner got 160.
David Warner scored 100 and
160.
Did what he did there. Yeah.
That was a match-winning innings. I think Marsh got 100 as well. And then they had that really close game against New Zealand, which I felt that was a game that they should have dominated. And they had this tendency to sort of score at 10 runs and over for the first 25 and then 6 runs and over for the next 25. The batting performances were really becoming kind of top heavy. But I mean, they still got a good score, 370 odd. But then because they fell away so dramatically in the last half of that innings, it gave New Zealand the chance. And all of a sudden you had Daryl Mitchell and I think Ravindra Jadeja. Is that his name? Yeah, so not Jadeja.
Rachin Ravinda.
Yeah, Rachin Ravinda. I think he may have got 100 and then Daryl Mitchell got a big score. And after all, you're sort of thinking, oh, they're going to chase this down, aren't they? And it was a pretty small ground, good wicket to bat on. And then they got wickets when they needed to. It was getting pretty close. I remember the Mitchell Stark bowled an over was 5 wides down the leg side, and that just completely changed things.
Yes.
And I remember a few expletives coming from yourself on live stream.
That's right. Yeah, we live streamed the game. Yes. Yeah. Because it was a pivotal moment in the match, and it went down the wire, and Stark bowled those wides, but he soon got back onto his line and lane.
No, this is the thing. So he turned it round after that. So so he showed the nerve to not let that get to him, and then there were 2 excellent stops by Marnus on the boundary as well, resulting in 1 or 2 run-outs. And then I think one of them, Josh Inglis had to take the ball like miles away from the stumps.
Yes, he did. I think that was Neesham who came back. Short, and that was the end of the game. Yeah.
So that game kind of felt like they were I don't know, I wouldn't say they were losing, but it was getting away from them a little bit. And then all of a sudden, towards the end, they were sort of like, okay, we better do our best to win this game in the last over.
Yes, well, scraped by just, and then went on to take on England, which was a pretty tough game with the bat from memory. Adam Zampa had to come in and, get a quick fire.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Score at the end.
Yeah, and it wasn't. It was just enough for to beat England. I think the other thing I would say is I felt that they, as I said, that they played so many games before the World Cup actually started, and I don't think that really helped them, to be honest. And started the tournament with 2 losses, and it wasn't looking very good. They didn't bowl particularly well in that first 20 overs against Sri Lanka, and it was that David Warner catch that sort of turned things around. But I think there were a few things that, as luck would have it, sort of went Australia's way. So I think the team as a whole were fatigued, but there were certain things, a couple of things that happened that sort of meant that players came in and out to the side and unexpectedly got some rest and a bit of a break when they needed it. So I think it was the fourth game in South Africa when Travis Head broke his wrist or his hand. And I kind of thought, oh no, that's really not good. I mean, that's going to really reduce their chances quite a lot here, because that opening partnership was doing so well between Head and Warner. I thought that's gonna be a huge issue for them. And I didn't think he'd make the World Cup. I thought broken wrist, broken hand, out for 6 weeks. He's not going to come back to play in the World Cup. But as it happened, the selectors made the right call to keep him in the squad. And he managed to come back and he scored 100 straight away again, I think against New Zealand, which again, another match-winning innings. So there was that. I mean, he had that unexpected rest because he broke his hand. Then there was Mitchell Marsh, went back home because his grandfather died. So he had a bit of a rest as well, a few games off. And then Glenn Maxwell fell out of a golf cart.
Oh yes, he did.
Yeah. So they all sort of got a little bit of a break and a little bit of rest at various times. Which
they did.
Yeah, which wasn't exactly.
Yes, no, it wasn't. No, I suppose there's always a silver lining, and those were, key moments for them to recharge and go again and make the run towards the final, which they did. Glenn Maxwell, in particular, he played 2 outstanding innings. The one against the Netherlands, against the Netherlands, but it was still pretty good. Still quick fire century from him, and Australia got over 400. But the game against Afghanistan, was the real turning point. If Australia lost that, they were out, and that was, one of the best innings we've ever seen in recent memory in one-day cricket for Australia. It was so unbelievable to do that under that sort of pressure. And then you had Pat Cummins at the other end doing what he was doing. Only added 12 in the partnership, which was 200 plus. They came in at 7 for 40 odd. And Glenn Maxwell doing the full salmon and cramping up, and having a bit of a joke and laugh about it. But, and just even watching it and live streaming it at the time, which we did on the podcast, my voice was gone. I couldn't believe what he was doing. And I didn't even know he made 200. As soon as he hit that 6 to finish the game off Mujeeb, I was like, has he made 200? And then I think it was you in the chat, Jehan, that said, didn't you realize he made 200? And I was like, no, I thought he made like 190 odd or something. Because he was so engrossed in what he was doing. You just couldn't believe what you were seeing.
Well, when they were 90 or 7 for 90 or whatever it was, I thought to myself, why am I even watching this? This is just almost humiliating to watch. But that was an amazing innings. And I think those sort of breaks in luck with Maxwell taking a break for a few games, Marsh, Head having that long break before coming into the middle of the World Cup, I think that completely worked out really well for Australia, because I think it just meant that towards the end of the tournament, they all came in quite fresh and started to gel as a team. And then that semi-final against South Africa, they're bowling first in these overcast, cloudy, English-type conditions, which never happens in India, really, does it? I mean,
no.
It was just one of those things, and they just bowled so well and so accurately and so tightly, and I think the fielding really stepped up in that game as well. They took their catches. I think
South Africa really.
They suffocated South Africa, and with South Africa, it only takes a little bit of pressure, and it's
especially in semi-finals. What's new? With South Africa always in semi-finals and World Cups.
And I just remember Pat Cummins taking the catch off Quinton de Kock when he skied one. He was trying to break the shackles because they just had a complete hold over them, and he went for a bit of a lofted hit / slog, I guess, and the ball went miles in the air. It was going to be a very difficult catch. I wasn't sure if he'd take it, but no, he got under it and he took it well, and I think they were 4 down by that by that point. Yeah, so I think come that semi-final, they were just on top of their game, and then come the final, I mean, that was a dramatic game as well. I thought more dramatic, even more dramatic than the semi-final. Pat Cummins winning the toss and
bowling first. Yes,
I thought that was
a gutsy move, but
gutsy decision. Yeah. Really kind of vital call from him, because when you think about when you play on these slow, low, dusty wickets, you're always wanting to get runs on the board because you're thinking the wicket's going to slow up and start gripping and turning as the game goes on, as you're getting towards the 100th over. But I think they'd looked at the stats and that sort of thing, and they probably worked out that actually it actually does get better to bat on come the second innings when there's a bit of dew and the ball actually comes on a bit better and the ball stops gripping and turning as much as it would do during the day. So yeah, I think they worked that out. And they bowled fantastically as well. I think they worked out from the start this is a slow, low gripping pitch. So there was a lot of spin, a lot of slower balls, cutters. I thought Pat Cummins bowled really well. Even Zampa bowled pretty well. I mean, towards the end of that 50 overs, the ball was really gripping and turning a lot. And I think with India, they just didn't want to play a shot in anger. They'd lost 3 early wickets after an explosive start from Rohit Sharma, and what a key catch that was that Travis Head.
Yes, I was just going to say Travis Head running back and taking that catch. That was the key moment in that in that final.
Yeah, because I guess he was threatening to take the game away from them at that stage. But then KL Rahul and Virat Kohli just settled in, and it was almost as if they said, "Yeah, we're not going to lose a wicket for 40 overs now. We're going to play a bit of Test cricket." Which I don't think that sort of cricket in a final doesn't win you the game. Like you have to have
that's right.
Impetus, I guess. So yeah, I mean they really strangled them with the ball, and I mean the good thing is they still managed to keep taking wickets towards the end and ensure that there wasn't a massive flourish at the end. I think there was a few boundaries from Siraj and Shami, or a couple of the tail enders towards the end, but chasing 240, I don't think that was enough. I don't think that was a total that India were going to be able to defend, but then Australia had a mini collapse at the beginning of that innings as well. So at that point, I was also a little bit unsure as well. Like, is this going to be close? Are they going to mess this up?
Yes, that's right.
Opportunity to chase 240, and David Warner got off to a good start, and then he just went after a ball that almost missed the pitch. That was so wide. Mitchell Marsh got out in a similar fashion, actually. Another just completely wide ball that he chased and edged behind. And then Steve Smith, LBW.
Yes.
In the stumps, doesn't review for someone who generally reviews most of the time.
Oh, that's right. Yes, he didn't review, didn't he? And it was missing, wasn't it? Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. So at that stage, it seemed to be going against Australia. I think what Travis Head did well in that innings was he got them off to a flyer. Warner in the first, him and Warner in the first over, and then he kept that going. But once they lost those early wickets, he sort of, I think he decided to soak up the pressure a little bit. So he stopped playing expansive shots for a period, as him and Marnus were getting a partnership together. And I think there was I just remember this one shot that sort of wouldn't say broke the shackles a bit, but kind of said to India that no, it's still on. We're gonna push you for these 240 runs. It was that slog sweep off Kuldeep Yadav, I think in like the 12th or 13th over. They hadn't scored a boundary in a few overs by that point. I think that shot completely released the pressure. And yeah, they just managed to go on from there. And yeah, it was a fantastic win, I thought.
It certainly was, and Marnus played his role too in that partnership. He got, what did he get, 70 odd in the end? Travis Head got out towards the end, and then Glenn Maxwell finished it off with the winning runs, and Australia winning the World Cup was outstanding. But yeah, the reaction from the crowd as well really stuck out for me. In all my time of watching cricket, I've been to an ODI in Adelaide with India and Australia playing, in the crowd of Indian supporters, making large noise and cheering and all that. But, to hear them, about 100,000 or so at the stadium in Ahmedabad, biggest stadium in the world in world cricket, fall silent when Travis Head was doing what he was doing and Australia winning the World Cup. Was an eerie sort of feeling. You just never really associate that with India, but I suppose that's how cricket is in India and how passionate they are. And Pat Cummins and Australia said we wanted to silence the crowd, and they certainly did that with their performance. And just unbelievable to do that, and for them to win a World Cup in India, which is very tough to do. Obviously, they didn't quite do that in 2011 for different reasons. It was a different team, different squad. But to win their second World Cup on the subcontinent, obviously they won in 1987 in that edition of the tournament. But to do it with this group of players this time around, the adversity that they had, 9-2, sort of, had to win every game, and to come up against India, the best side in the tournament up until that point, is that, Australia wanted it more. I think the problem with India, as you mentioned, Jehan, is that they were a bit, timid, and they didn't want to quite, be expressive as they've shown throughout the whole tournament. Let's be honest, they weren't really challenged throughout the whole tournament, really. They were at times, but they were the best side going around. But I suppose whenever you encounter adversity or you lose a couple of games and you need a win badly, that gives you that bit of extra strength that you need to achieve something. And that's what Australia had. India didn't have that. They weren't really tested. They didn't really have adversity. They didn't really need to scrap to win games because they qualified so easily.
I think the other thing is that when you're losing, but you're nowhere near your best, that's a little bit of a motivator as well. Whereas if you feel you're playing as well as you can, but you still keep losing, then you know that it's going to remain difficult. So I think Australia probably knew that they could improve their fielding a lot in particular, and if a few more things went their way, they could definitely be one of the challengers to win. I felt that for India, I think everything just went their way in the first part of the tournament, in terms of conditions, where they played, certain umpiring decisions. There was some dodgy umpiring in the game against Bangladesh. I don't know if you remember that. So I think
Kirby trying to get his century in that game, I think, as well.
So that's the problem when everything goes your way in terms of conditions, and you're not maybe having to play at your absolute best, or if you're not, I suppose if you're not having to play your best under pressure, and then you suddenly have to do that in a final against a team that's all of a sudden playing their best cricket, who is also one of the best, or probably the best team in that tournament, then it's going to be difficult. I think that's what happened with India. I think this win in some ways was similar for Australia. It was similar to the 99 win. I don't think they were as up against it as they were in 99. I think in 99 there was a few more teams that had the potential to win that World Cup. And yeah, and no one really Australia were really playing pretty badly in that World Cup. I think in this one, I think more people had confidence that they'd be able to turn it around, and they probably thought there's probably only just one good performance. But in '99, there were a lot of problems. Like Shane Warne wasn't bowling particularly well. Even in the games against Bangladesh and Scotland, they weren't particularly convincing. I don't know if you can remember that. But in the sense that they had to go from losing 2 games to winning all the rest in a row, I thought it was similar in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. It was. And that's why Australia know how to win World Cups. And probably this one out of the lot, probably out of the 6 World Cups that they've won, probably have to say this one's the biggest one because of the challenge that was ahead of them in the final against India. 2015, they were dominant in that World Cup and they were one of the favourites to win. They did here at home. 2007, 2003, they had their challenges in those World Cups, but they were the best team by far, undefeated. 1999 was.
I don't think they had any challenges in the 2007 World Cup. They just
no, they didn't. They were pretty dominant in both 2003 and 2007. But 2007, they were clearly the best team in the tournament out of the teams that were there at the time. 2003 had their challenges because of Shane Warne being banned and obviously injuries and all that stuff. And obviously Andrew Simons made his name in that game against Pakistan where he scored that 100 and they won that game. And
there were a few close games in 2003 as well. The game against England, the game against New Zealand, even the semi-final against Sri Lanka, they had to dig deep to win those games. Whereas 2007 was just more. It was just completely dominant.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely was. And then 1999, they had their challenges, but they were able to win against Pakistan in the final at Lords. And then obviously 1987, well, under Alan Border was a bit of a surprise for everyone, really, because Australian cricket weren't doing so well in the 80s, but for them to win that World Cup was quite special. So Australian cricket does have a rich history in World Cups, and they just know how to win. They know how to win from any situation. And you have a look at the tournament, you have a look at players who had significant contributions and they made a difference in each of the game. You have a look at all of the Australian players. All of them had a role to play in some part in all of the games that they won.
Yeah.
And they all did their part in all of the games. Scoring runs, taking wickets, and many highlights and many things that they've done in this World Cup as a team to achieve those things was
building plays as well. Like those two.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And everyone did their role and thoroughly deserved their victory. When you look back on it and say, well, how on earth did they do that? Well, they found a way to do it, and many great highlights. Glenn Maxwell's innings will be remembered for a long time.
Yeah,
the way that he went about that's probably the one highlight. There's so many, but that's probably the one highlight that stands out the most when you look back on this Australian campaign in this World Cup. Jehan, would you agree that Glenn Maxwell type innings was probably the one innings that we'll probably never see again?
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely say that. I mean, it stands out for how extraordinary and ridiculous it was at times, or throughout the whole innings, to be honest. But I would say that for me, the standout performance was Travis Head's 100 in the final. Under that sort of pressure, with 120,000 people in the ground, supporting India, for him to soak up the pressure and then play an innings like that to win the World Cup for your country, I thought that was fantastic.
Absolutely, it was. So many highlights, as I said. So many that you can choose from. And I think I heard Brad Hodge. He was on the Howie games. I heard this. I listened to this interview the other day because he was the coach of the part of the coaching setup in the South African series over there when they were there for the ODIs and T20s. And when Travis Head broke his hand, he recounted the conversation that Andrew McDonald and all the other coaches had and said, "Well, do we, take him out or do we replace him?" And Andrew McDonald said, "No, you can't replace Travis Head. He's a match winner." It was a bit of a risk at the time when they said, we got to take someone who's broken their hand and only play them for the last few games of the World Cup. It's a bit of a risk, but it paid off. And he was right to keep him in and say, no, we want him in the side because sure, there's other people who can win, do the role and do the job, but there's only one Travis Head and he's a game changer. We've seen that over the last few years from him. So
it turned out to be the absolute correct call, didn't it? And at the time I was sort of thinking, well, how's he going to play with a broken hand within a few weeks? I didn't think it was going to be possible, if I'm honest.
No, they're often difficult broken hands, especially if you're a batter. You need to have your hands to grip the bat. But he went through that sort of pain because he was in pain a little bit as well, you could see. And when he was managing it, I don't think it was fully healed. It was healed to a good enough, reasonable state where he could bat and operate. But it was a great campaign that provided many highlights. Certainly Australia's best World Cup win that they've had for a long time. Just the challenges that they had in terms of overcoming adversity and challenges and losing the first two games and doing that, and everyone did their role, and a perfect way to send off a few players as well, probably their last World Cup potentially, the likes of Warner, obviously, because he's retired now, probably Smith and Stark as well, and those guys, for them to have another World Cup win under their belt before they retire in the next few years is certainly a great way to celebrate their ODI careers. But definitely a good campaign nonetheless, and one that they should be proud of as well. Certainly, I think everyone was happy, certainly on the live stream when we, just talking about this, it brings back memories on when we did the live stream at the time on the podcast and all that stuff, the celebrations, and everyone couldn't believe what just happened. It's and obviously Mitchell Marsh had a bit of criticism for putting his feet up on the World Cup after the win, celebrating, which wasn't frowned upon. But anyway, that's just what you do when you celebrate. And so Travis Head having a few drinks afterwards to celebrate. Let's just say it wasn't functional when Australia had to play that T20 series just after the World Cup final.
I think he missed a few games.
Yes, he wasn't looking too flash there, Trav, but he scored some runs in that T20 series too. So maybe it does work for Travis Head. If he has a few, then it gets him in the right mindset to go out there and do the job. But very interested to hear your thoughts on that, Jehan, and I think everyone would agree that it was a superb campaign for Australia in that World Cup last year in India. Certainly a massive achievement, as we've already talked about.
Well, I think it was just a great reward for all the planning and preparation that they put into it in the last 2.5 years leading up to the World Cup.
Yeah.
So I think they definitely the management saw that as a goal from the outset, which I think was a failure leading into the 2019 World Cup, if I'm honest. But this time they were ranked number one, leading into the when they lost to South Africa in the warm-up series. But they were ranked number one for the couple of years leading into the World Cup. So yeah, I think it was good reward for all of that.
Definitely. No, absolutely. And I think all the players certainly would share those same thoughts as well. Definitely a big achievement, and it's always a big achievement when you win a World Cup. And, hopefully Australia can win many more in the years to come. Let's hope in the next World Cup in 2027 they can. Maybe with a different look team, but, you can't discount Australia from winning World Cups. They just know how to win, as we've already discussed. So let's move on, Jehan, and discuss the Australian summer last year from 2023-24, which was our next topic of this discussion. The Australian summer, which saw Australia play Pakistan in 3 tests, the West Indies in 2 tests, and 3 ODIs and 3 T20s to end the Australian summer. And then obviously Australia went to New Zealand for the first time since 2016 to play in 2 test matches at the back end of the summer. And Australia got the job done over there. They won 3-0 against Pakistan in the best of 3, which was as expected before the series started. David Warner retired and farewelled at the SCG. And there was a close test match at the MCG, which Pakistan nearly pulled off that run chase. We were chasing 300, but Australia held their nerve, and Pat Cummins was able to make a difference in that test match. And then you had the West Indies series, two test matches. It was a 1-1 series draw. Obviously, Australia winning in Adelaide, and then the famous win at the Gabba, of course. Shamar Joseph doing what he was doing there, 7 wickets. Steve Smith was tried as the new opener with varied results. He did well in the last test. He carried his bat and got 90-odd, but couldn't get Australia over the line. So those were the test matches between Pakistan and the West Indies. And then we moved on to the ODIs and T20s against the West Indies. The ODIs, they won 3-0, which was expected, very one-sided. A glimpse into the future. They tried players like Fraser McGurk, Bartlett, Matt Short, Hardy, Sutherland, and Morris to see what they were made of in that series. And they all did pretty well. They all chipped in and made some contributions. And then the T20s to end the summer on against the West Indies. They won that 2-1 in the best of 3. It was a very high-scoring series, and the West Indies were able to win the last game in Perth, yes, because Australia won in Hobart and Adelaide. And then the last game in Perth, they were able to win the West Indies. And then the test series against New Zealand, well, 2-0 as predicted by everyone. Australia were dominant as always, as they are, against New Zealand in test matches. Cameron Green's 174 not out was a superb innings in the first test, probably coming of age and a breakout innings for him. Also a key 10th wicket partnership with Josh Hazlewood of 116 in that first test proved to be the difference. And then Alex Carey, his 98 not out in the second test, and the run chase was a pivotal moment in his career as a test cricketer, and also very important in that second test. He had good partnerships with Marsh of 140 for the 6th wicket, and then Pat Cummins 61 in that partnership they had together, unbeaten, which got them over the line in the end in that run chase. So a pretty busy summer last year for Australia. And I think looking back on the summer, they'll be very pleased with all the performances across the formats and how they went about things. Jehan, how would you assess Australia's 2023-24 home summer? What are your thoughts on how they did in all those series?
So I think, ultimately it was a successful summer. Apart from the test series against the West Indies, which they drew, they can win because they lost that last test match, or the second test match. But my feeling overall was the test summer in particular was a little bit underwhelming for the team. I had a feeling that there was still probably a lot of fatigue that had been carried over from the previous season. So when you think about it, the previous year was there was a lot of cricket in that season. From the end of the home summer, they go off to India for that away test series. Then you had the one-day series after that, then World Test Championship, then the Ashes, and then they, not long after the Ashes, they've got the Winter White Ball Series in South Africa, then they're off to India, and then the World Cup. They finished the World Cup, and within a few weeks they're back playing the home summer again. So, and especially when you're not having to play England or India or even South Africa, one of the top, or if you're not having to play any of the top sides, they probably could afford to relax a little bit, I suppose, or maybe not be as sharp as they would be normally. So yeah, I mean that was my overall thoughts. Against Pakistan, first Test match was a dominating win in Perth. 160 odd from David Warner on day one when the ball was moving around a little bit. So that was a match-winning innings. Was that his last Test 100 for Australia? I believe so, probably.
Yes, it was. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So great innings, and on the first morning the ball was moving around a lot and a bit of uneven bounce.
And he played that outrageous shot. I remember he played that outrageous shot that he flicked for six over third man. I think yes.
Yeah.
Which was, I don't know how on earth he hit that, but only David Warner can do those things, I suppose.
Yeah, a good partnership with him and Khawaja. Probably set up the that win. They must have won by a big margin from memory.
Yeah, it was 360 in that first test. It was quite a big margin of victory. Yeah. And also Mitchell Marsh chipped in with a 90 odd as well, I think, in that test as well in the second innings. I think he chipped in with.
Yeah, I think that the test pitch at Optus it hasn't really settled in. Like, it was a little, in terms of uneven bounce and people getting hit. It was a bit dodgy in that series against India a few years ago. Thankfully, Australia won the toss and batted first, so they were able to take advantage of that. But I think even when Marsh scored that 90 odd, he got hit a few times as well. And then by the time Pakistan had to bat on it on day 3 or 4, I think they'd almost given up by that point.
They pretty much did. They knew it was going to be tough, and it proved to be the case. They had no answers
They didn't want to stay out there when the ball's just jumping off the surface, off the length.
No, they didn't.
It was and again, there's probably not much in it for them to try and hang around a little bit in that scenario because they were going to lose anyway. I think I went to to that match, and what was a little bit disappointing for me was there was hardly anyone at the ground. So Nathan Lyon took his 500th wicket in front of about 8,000 people, something like that. When you think that Shane Warne took his 700th in front of 100,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Warne didn't have to wait for a review, unlike Nathan Lyon, which he had to wait for a review to be completed to celebrate his 500th wicket. But nonetheless, one of a magical moment for Gaz.
Yeah, no, it was, and I was there when he took that wicket. But yeah, it was a bit disappointing that not many people turned up for the whole game. Actually, it wasn't just the first couple of days. It was the attendance was poor throughout the whole game. And then they went on to the MCG. I think the MCG pitch in the last few years has been pretty good in terms of a good balance between bat and ball. There's a bit more extra bounce in the pitch now. The ball's carrying through to the slips and gullies. So, So, sorry, I'm just going to have a look at my notes here because I'm trying to remember what happened in that test match. But so basically, Pat Cummins and Nathan Lyon got wickets in the first innings. Pakistan 120. Yeah. So and also so Pakistan set 317 to win. Comfortable win in the end for Australia, 76 runs. It's not a massive win, but reasonably comfortable. But I thought Pakistan they bowled okay in that Test match, and it was a lot more of an even contest compared to the Perth Test. And then the Sydney Test match, Pakistan were ahead for a lot of that match from memory. And then they sort of, from memory, I think they collapsed in the third innings, and Hazelwood took three wickets in an over towards the end of one of the days.
Yes, he did. Yeah,
and that sort of completely turned the Test match. And then having to chase down, it was probably about 80 to 100 odd, I think. David Warner managed to get 50 in his last innings, which was pretty good, and he got out right at the end, so he got to walk off to the applause of the SCG crowd. So I thought that was pretty nice to watch. So look, I think that series overall was a little bit underwhelming for Australia. I thought in terms of the bowling, it seemed like Pat Cummins just seemed to be getting them out of strife whenever they needed. Basically, whenever they needed wickets, he'd come on and change the game in Australia's favour. And there would be times where if he wasn't around or if he wasn't bowling, then they didn't look like taking wickets. And then against the West Indies, even the first Test. I mean, the first Test match was at Adelaide, wasn't it? I think that was a pretty dominating win, and
it was a 10-wicket victory in the first Test by Australia, so pretty dominant.
Yeah, and I think there was a bit of a mini collapse from Australia when they were batting, and then Travis Head scored one of those dynamite hundreds to get them out of trouble. And I remember Brian Lara saying on commentary that there was a LBW that was an umpire's call that went against Travis Head, and when he was on like 2 or 3, it was like, if we had that one, then it would have been a lot closer. It may have been a closer Test match. So I mean, the reason I bring that up is it's not like they were completely dominant. I know it was a 10-wicket win.
Now, it was challenging from memory. The pitch was a little bit challenging and a bit difficult for scoring at times. I can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and then obviously that led on to the Gabba Test match. So that was a good toss to win for the West Indies to bat first. Again, West Indian batting, they all contributed throughout the order. I don't think they completely got on top of the Australian bowling, but at the same time they didn't fall by the wayside. So they managed to get a score on the board, and then I think Australia collapsed in the first innings, and then they got some tail end runs. I think Cummins.
Yes, Alex Carey contributed with some runs there. He got 90. He got 65 in that innings.
Yeah, and I think Cummins got 60 odd as well. Is that right?
I think he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he got 60 odd. Yeah, he made a 50. Yeah.
So those 8th, 9th wicket partnerships sort of saved Australia, and they actually ended up declaring 9 down, I think, because they thought they'd have a go at West Indies under the lights. And the following day, West Indies came out, and again, it was a similar batting performance to the first innings. A lot of contributions, not many big scores, like hundreds or anything like that. But to set a target of 215, okay, sure, it's a pretty good wicket. You're thinking Australia should have chased that down. But then Shamar Joseph, just ran through the Australian batting lineup with an injured foot as well. I think a toe. I think he had a broken toe or something like that.
Yes, he copped a vicious Yorker from Mitchell Starc the previous day, which blew off his front toe. Which left it bruised and sore. And the West Indies said he probably won't bowl in the second innings, but if he needs to bowl, he will, and he did, and he took 7 wickets and he bowled like the wind, and Australia had no answers, and he just had one of those days.
I mean,
his story is such a inspiring story. From a remote village in Guyana to be the West Indies hero at the Gabba and did what he did. It's such an inspiring story and thoroughly deserved from a very talented, exciting cricketer who's going to take a lot of wickets for the West Indies going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great story, and he took 5 wickets in the first test as well in Adelaide. I think he got Steve Smith out first.
Yes, he got Steve Smith out first ball in Test cricket, which is not a bad way to start your career.
Yeah, after that Gabba loss, I heard a couple of Australian pundits saying, "Oh well, it was just one bloke that beat them," but I don't think that's entirely true. I felt it was a team performance from the West Indies. They had to put runs on the board, and in the first innings, Joseph only got 1 wicket. It was actually Alzari Joseph and Kemal Roach that got 7 or 8 wickets between them. It was a good performance, bowling performance in particular from the West Indies. They took their catches as well. I mean, that's the other thing. You can create chances, but you have to take the difficult catches as well.
Yes, I think it was in the first test in Adelaide. Come to think of that about their catching, I think they had someone under the hood up close. I can't remember who they got out, but he took a very good catch, very good captaincy from Craig Braithwaite in that first test in Adelaide. I can't remember who it was, but as you said, their catching was pretty good, and that was the difference, especially in the last test of the series when they went on to win.
On that final day, I just remember one of the Australians went for a slog and skied it up in the air, and it was a difficult catch to take, but the cover fielder or mid-off just got under it and took it. And that, I think it was Mitchell Starc. Yeah, it was Mitchell Starc towards the end. And I think he'd hit a few boundaries by that point as well and was threatening to take the game away.
Yes, he did, yes.
He skied one, and that catch was a crucial catch. Good fielding and bowling performance from the West Indies. Their bowling had definitely improved a lot since the tour the previous year. The Perth Test match, they had Alzari Joseph, Jaden Seals, and Roach, and they didn't look like they could buy a wicket between them. I think Australia got 600 for 5 or something.
Yes.
I think there were 2 double hundred.
200.
Yeah,
Smith in that test. Yeah.
So they don't. I mean, probably just that experience of playing in these conditions probably helped them a lot. I thought Australia's batting was definitely underwhelming. Great innings from Smith in that wrong chase.
91 not out. He got carried his bat.
Yeah, and he almost got them close. I remember he slog swept or not a slog sweep, but he hit one of those ramp shots towards the end for 6 when things were getting a bit tight, and when he was batting with Josh Hazlewood at the end. But I think the way that Joseph went through the batting lineup, I kind of felt that there are some vulnerabilities there. At the time, I was kind of thinking that number 4 was a little bit too high for Cameron Green, but he proved me wrong one test match after that. So,
yes.
And then the New Zealand series, that was a fantastic innings, and we had partnerships with Hazlewood, and was it Carey as well?
Yes, we have. I think Carey in the second test, had that partnership with Marsh, and obviously, with Cummins towards the end. But Green, that big partnership with Hazlewood really was the difference in that first test in trying conditions at the Basin Reserve.
Yeah,
on a green top.
Yeah, on a green top. I mean, that innings was the difference between being 170 all out and getting to 350 or 360. So it was a match-winning innings for sure. Yeah, and I think they felt that they wanted him to bat at 4 because they think he's one of the top 6 batsmen in the country. I think he sort of proved that from that during that innings.
Certainly, Greg Chappell thinks he should bat at 4. I've heard Greg Chappell talk about Cameron Green, and he's the one that really discovered Cameron Green really when he was bowling well in his younger days as a bowler. But he always said he's more of a batter first than he is a bowler. But he's handy either way. But he should bat at number 4. He's best suited to 4, and he's played his best innings for WA and Sheffield Shield cricket at 4.
Yeah,
it certainly proved the case in that first test in New Zealand when Australia really needed it. And his second test century as well. It's probably out of the 2 he's got already. The one he got was in Ahmedabad, and that was on a flat track, and wasn't really testing. Whereas this one was testing, and conditions in New Zealand with the ball was moving a bit of a green top, and Australia in a bit of trouble. So, he's got that ability, he's got that potential. You can see that. He just needs to try and get it together in terms of the mental side, which he's always talked about, and that's always been a challenge for him. But he's got the skills. You can clearly see that, and we saw that in that innings, in that test in New Zealand.
Well, I think he's a lot better when he's trying to score, and he has that sort of positive mind frame. I think he, when he starts getting bogged down and not really knowing what or gauging the sort of tempo he needs to bat in, I think that's when he struggles. He was pretty disappointing in the Ashes. His batting, sorry, was disappointing in the Ashes series, where I felt that he couldn't quite get that tempo right, where he was sort of stuck between, do I attack now, do I defend for periods of time. I think he's just better when he's just trying to score. So I think he should just look to score. And that I'm not talking about Bazball. I'm talking about bat on ball. If it's a good ball, defend, or even try and get a single hit, then hit the bad balls for 4. I mean, it's just that sort of positive approach to batting. And I felt that he batted like that in his first 100 at Ahmedabad, where it was a flat wicket, sure, but Khawaja was just sort of having a net at the other end and not going anywhere, and I felt that Cameron Green came in and put a bit of impetus into the innings on that first day, and that was a really good 100, because I just felt that he was looking to score the whole time, and I think when he gets bogged down or he gets a bit sort of confused about the tempo that he should be playing at, I think that's when he struggles a bit. But yeah, I think definitely good enough to bat at 4. The problem now is that he's injured, so that's going to cause some issues going into the summer coming. And the other thing is, I'm not entirely convinced about Steve Smith opening the batting as well. That's what I took from last summer. I feel like he only put. So the thing is, David Warner batted his whole career of 12, 13 years without really having a solid partner at the other end. He had
he hasn't.
He had Ed
Cowan, Watson,
and then
Rogers.
Yeah. So I think Cowan and Rogers were the ones that stayed the longest. But other than that, it's just been a revolving door. And ironically, the only one that's managed to stay in there a little bit longer is Khawaja, who's not an opener to begin with. He only got in there. He only was asked to open because that was the only way they could fit him in the team. So I think they're going to get, once he retires, they're going to get to a stage where they're going to have to look for 2 openers. And my feeling is that Steve Smith put his hand up to open because he knew no one else wanted to do it. And also he's getting towards the end of his career, and I think he's been a little bit underwhelming since the 2019 Ashes series in Test cricket. I don't know how many hundreds he scored in that time, but I wouldn't say it was too many. And I'm guessing his average must have dropped a bit from the mid 60s. Yeah, so my feeling is that I don't know what you think about how you feel, but I think he should go back to number 4. And I think they need to get a specialist opener in there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, those are the questions that a lot of people are certainly asking, and that's a perfect way to talk about the next topic, which is the ongoing transition with the Australian Test team. Potential replacements or retirements going forward. But yes, that is an interesting question, Jehan. And something that Greg Chappell said. I heard him talk about that with Steve Smith, and about, when you get towards the end of your career and, starting to, have a new challenge or a new motivation. And that's what he clearly wanted, really, to test himself, because he's already done a lot. He's already achieved everything there is to achieve in the game. He scored, loads of runs, 20-odd centuries. So he's done everything in terms of batting, and probably, with Smith, and this is something that Greg Chappell said as well, the weighting, he's not a good waiter at number 4, in terms of waiting to come to bat, using that mental energy already. So probably it's a good thing for him that he's going out there early to use that energy up, rather than, using it all up in the changing room, which, he's that type of person. Probably Marnus is the same as well, where they use that mental energy up before they go out to bat. And then they get out, because they've used all that mental energy, and they're a bit slack. So, yes, they've tried the experiment. They've tried it for 2 series now, West Indies and New Zealand, where his numbers in New Zealand, what did he average in New Zealand? Smith as opener. He averaged 12.75. And his highest score was 31 in 4 innings. And he got out no 50s, no 100s, and he only made 1 duck in that series against New Zealand. And then the West Indies series was a bit of a mixed bag. If you take out the 90-odd that he got in the second test of the Gabba, then his numbers look a little bit worse for wear. But obviously, as you mentioned before, with Cameron Green being injured, Australia sort of got their arm twisted around their back, and they will have to probably go down the route of selecting a proper opener for this summer against India. They'll probably have to go to a Bancroft, or, look at other options, maybe a Renshaw or Harris, and then probably Smith back at number 4. If Green's ruled out entirely, which is not official yet, but, asked him to bowl bouncers in that 3rd ODI, which was pretty much gone for Australia against England in that series recently. So what was the point of him bowling bouncers, which has caused some problems with his back, which he has a few problems with in the past. So, yeah, I think, look, they'll probably revert back to him batting at 4 for this summer if Green's ruled out. And then obviously you can pick a specialist opener there. And then obviously, beyond this summer and going forward, when Green's fit, do you keep him and Mitchell Marsh in the same team as well? Mitchell Marsh hasn't done anything wrong. When he came into the Ashes and scored that 100 at Headingley, when he came in for Cameron Green, he was out with a hamstring strain. He didn't do anything wrong, and he had a pretty good summer last summer. He played some very important innings for Australia. the first test match against Pakistan, he got that 90 odd, but also the second test in Melbourne, which we failed to mention about before, Jehan, when we talk about the summer that's just gone, that he was dropped early on when Australia were 4 for not many odd.
Yeah.
Yes, and then Australia were able to, build from that and rebuild, and Marsh was a big part of that. Sorry?
He got 90 odd in that innings as well, didn't he?
I think he did. Yeah, I think he did. I think he got another 90 odd in that game. He was dropped early on when Australia were 4 down for not many. Yeah, so he played a few important innings in the summer, and he got a few wickets as well with the ball.
What do you think of this idea? It's a little bit out there, but what about him opening?
Well, Greg Chappell has talked about that. I heard Greg Chappell say that Mitchell Marsh should be opening the batting. He can do a David Warner type role.
Yeah.
So you're not the only one to think that, Jehan. Even the great Greg Chappell has said that as well.
And then you could probably strengthen the lower order of the batting as well if he's opening.
You could do that, yes. And then you could have Smith at 4, then have Green at 6, which is not bad. And then you have your tailenders after that. That could be something. There has been talk about Travis Head potentially opening, but I don't think he wants to open. I think he just wants to stay at 5.
I'm not sure about Travis Head. He's a little bit too flashy outside off stump. I mean, that's just the way he plays. But if you're doing that against the new red ball, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, but, it's all right in one-day cricket and T20 cricket because the ball doesn't swing for long.
Yeah. And also, India will come here with plans against him. Like, I'm sure they'll bowl wide at him and set 2 gullies and a third man and try and get him caught there. That's what they did last time.
And they'll definitely go with the short ball ploy, which they left it too late in the World Test Championship final. And then that's how he got out in the end, really, didn't he? They finally tried everything else, and they said, we'll just bowl short to him, and he got out. So you could have done that earlier, but he's worked on that, Trav.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And he's sort of done well at 5. His record's pretty good since he's come back into the side after he got dropped.
I mean, the other thing is if he gets out to the new ball, then you've lost a potential counter attacking innings against the old ball later on, which he's become so good at doing, like he did in the World Test Championship final and in that innings against the West Indies in the first test.
Yes, you do lose that if you do make him as an opener. So I think he'll stay at 5, and then if Green's ruled out entirely for the series, which is a possibility, we don't know how severe the injury is with his back, but if it is not too severe, I don't think they'll risk him anyway. I don't think they'll rush him back because he is the preferred option going forward into the future, and you want to keep him playing cricket for as long as possible. So you don't want to rush him back. So they may have to go to
a specialist opener. Yeah. I think Travis Head's going to have a much bigger role to play with the ball as well now that Cameron Green's injured. Because they're going to have to get those extra. If it's a hot day and they're having to bowl 90 overs, they're going to have to get that 5th overs out of the 5th bowler option. And if Cameron Green's not there, that's going to be an issue. So will they try and get Marnus to bowl a few overs as well? Because I don't think Marsh is going to be able to bowl as many overs as Green has been doing.
No, because we're going to talk about it a bit later, but he did bowl in the ODI series, and then he didn't play the last game because he was sore.
Yeah,
he hasn't bowled for a while, which that's a valid point. So yes, he will play a big part with the ball trap and Marnus as well, and that's what Australia will have to ponder about. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. But eventually they will have to choose 2 openers because Khawaja is going to retire soon. I don't know when, but how old is he? 37. So I don't think he's going to play until he's 40 plus. So you have to try and find an opener there, and you have to try and find another opener as well, because, you know, probably Smith will go back to 4, and they'll probably try something different going forward. But and obviously Green and Marsh being in the same side and backup options as well. You know, Australia like to have an all-rounder. So what happens if Marsh gets injured? If he plays one of the tests against India this summer, he gets injured, who do you want as an all-rounder? Do you go to Aaron Hardy or Will Sutherland, who have done pretty well in first-class cricket in their short careers? There could be potential options as well. And with the bowling, well, Australia's pretty much good in the bowling stocks, really. It's more the batting that's lacking depth at the moment. The bowling's not. You still have some good bowlers in there, like Scott Boland, Michael Nessa. Who can come in, Ajay Richardson if he's fit. You know, potential Lance Morris. He's had his injuries.
Yeah, you're right. It's the batting that's looking weak at the moment, isn't it? And they seem reluctant to bring people out of Sheffield Shield cricket into the Test team.
They are. You know, Bancroft hasn't done anything wrong. I think if I had to choose one opener, I would go with him, because he scored, you know, mountains of runs for WA. He scored a few hundreds. He's done well over there for Gloucestershire and county cricket this England summer that's just gone in all formats for them. He's done pretty well. You know, he's okay. Putting the South Africa thing to one side and all that stuff, you know, looking at what he's done since then, you know, he's done pretty well. You know, he's done
really well.
He hasn't done too much wrong.
He's probably the most successful opener in the Sheffield Shield in the last few years. The argument I hear about him that I hear often is that his Test record is poor, and if he hasn't been able to prove it in Test cricket before, how's he going to do any differently this time? But I think that's a bit of a silly argument, because if you're going to say that, then you may as well not have the Sheffield Shield. And how many players over the years have been dropped and come back, and, you know, a lot of them have become greats or have done really well, like over the years, like particularly in the 90s, like Matthew Hayden, Justin Langer, Damien Martin, Ricky Ponting, Steve Waugh, all those years ago. You know, were they told, well, you weren't successful, so you don't get a second go? You know what I mean?
Well, you know, everyone gets dropped in their career. Even the great players you just mentioned there got dropped. Really, that's the problem that Australia's had, isn't it? We haven't had a stable opening partnership since Hayden and Langer retired. Haven't we? When you look at it, who we tried? Phil Jakes, Simon Kadich, Shane Watson. Who else? David Warner, who was a constant for years. And then he had Ed Cowan and Chris Rogers and Bancroft and Will Bukowski when he played that one test against India in 2020-21. Who else? There's so many. Marcus Harris was tried. Yes. So, you know, there's a lot of different partnerships and different combinations. And obviously Usman Khawaja, we've got him. Yeah. He was probably the longest partner.
He's the one that lasted the longest, ironically, isn't he?
He did. Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're probably right. He probably has. Yeah. So Australia have tried a lot of openers since Hayden and Langer with varied success, which, you know, you got to stick to one partnership or, you know, give someone a go, really. I think that's what you got to do. Eventually, you will have to. Oh, sorry, Matt Renshaw. I forgot him. Yeah, he's opened the batting with David Warner a few times. But he's not opening anymore. He's batting down the order for Queensland. So, you know, is he a contender? But, you know, Australia will have to try and ask.
That was a bit of a strange decision by him to bat in the middle order when he's been brought up as an opener. I don't know if he was thinking he was going to be able to break into the middle order, but I mean, they've clearly needed an opener for a long time, so I'm not sure why he really went down that route.
No, not really. When you look back on it, Justin Langer wasn't really an opener, really. He batted down the middle order, and he became an opener because that was the second coming of his Test career, especially that 2001 Ashes. That was the first time.
Well, he only became an opener because Michael Slater lost form.
Yes.
01.
So he had to turn himself around from a middle order player to an opener, and he did a pretty good job, actually. JL. So you can do it, but only a few can. It's a very specialist role, as we've seen with Steve Smith. If you were India, if you were Shami or Siraj or Bumrah, would you like to see Steve Smith open the batting or specialist opener? I think they'll take the Steve Smith option, would they, with the new ball? Get the best batter out early. So you got to think about the team as well, and have your best players playing in the best positions. Having Smith and Head at 4 and 5 works. We saw that in the World Test Championship final. Imagine if they didn't bat together at 4 and 5. Imagine if Smith opened. Then Australia wouldn't have had that partnership which they had between Smith and Head, and they wouldn't have made hundreds, and Australia wouldn't have made 400. And it was probably going to be a different result. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, the old saying goes. And I think Australia have tinkered around a little bit too much with that. A lot of people would say, well, the experiment wasn't, you haven't done it for a prolonged period. But there comes a point in time where you try it for a bit and you say, maybe it's not working out. You can tell if it's not working out. And it probably isn't with Smith because he's got a lot of moving parts to his batting. And he is a candidate for LBWs these days as well.
Yeah. That's right. And
I think
when you look at Steve Smith's technique, that he has completely honed himself. I wouldn't say it's textbook by any imagination, but basically in the way that he walks across the stumps, he's worked out a way of minimizing getting caught in the slips, or in the gully, or basically by covering his off stump. If it's wide of the off stump, then he can leave it. But if it's in that channel, he's got it covered because he's across. And when he was in his prime, he was able to negotiate that ball that ducks in, because his reflexes were so good, and his hands and his hand-eye coordination was so good that any ball that was coming straight towards the stumps, he'd get his bat down just in time. And when plenty of bowlers have tried to get him out like that, they've been successful 1 in 100 times maybe. So I think that was, I've heard Stuart Broad talking about that, and I think that was what was so successful about him. But I think is that as you're getting a little bit towards the end of your career, the reflexes are not quite as good, they're not quite as sharp. And then the other thing is with the new ball, the ball moves faster. Like if there's any movement off the pitch or in the air, it's gonna, you have to be even more quick with your reflexes to keep those balls out. So I'm as I said, I'm not entirely convinced that they should continue with him opening. I think it's okay. Like if he had a really strong middle order and he wanted to go up to open, I think then that would be reasonable. But I think he's needed in the middle order to strengthen that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there is a big difference between batting in the middle order with an older ball compared to batting at the top of the order with a new ball. It moves a lot slower when it's a lot older. It doesn't move as much. There's not much swing or seam movement off the pitch. Whereas when you're batting at the top of the order, a bit of something in the surface, a bit of moisture, of course the ball's going to nip around and swing around a bit. And the way he's got out as opener as well has showed.
Well, he never used to get out LBW, and he never used to get caught in the slip, like in the second or third slip, and that that's how he's been getting out recently.
Well, he has, but he hasn't, gotten out to that regularly. But over the last few years, he has. Same with LBWs as well.
Yeah.
So, yes, but it will be interesting, Jehan, because I'm sure you listened to that episode on Willow Talk. They discussed about potentially half the team retiring all at once.
I haven't seen that episode actually. Really?
Well, they did do an episode on that, and potentially that could happen going forward. In terms of transition, players getting on a bit, the Australian team, sort of like Dad's Army, really.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what Dad's Army is, it's one of those old shows in England back in the day, who were all old themselves. So the Australian team is sort of like Dad's Army at the moment, but they're still getting the job done, experience and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So all that stuff as well, and going forward and looking at, transition, it's what all teams have to do, I suppose, in cricket. And all sports as well, when you come to the natural end of your cycle, you have to, go through that period, which is always a difficult one. And probably the last major sort of transition we had, Jehan, was probably 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10 period. Yeah, all those legends retired. You had Warne, McGrath, Langer, Hayden, Gilchrist. They all retired a few years apart from each other. Brett Lee as well. Well, he was still playing, but he didn't play Test cricket because his body gave up, of course, but he was still playing ODIs and T20s. But if we're just solely focusing on the Test team, they all retired at the same time. Then you had Ricky Ponting, who retired a few years after that as well, and gave up captaincy. And then when you have a look at this current group of players, all of them debuted in the similar time frame. Let's see, Lyon, Cummins, Smith, Stark, they all debuted in 2011. Remember that period? Khawaja, and then David Warner was in the side as well. So they stuck together, and until now. So it's very important to. Sorry,
Hazelwood,
yes, he was in that 2014 period when he came into the side. And when you look at it,
one-day debut in 2009 when he was like a 19-year-old.
I think he did. Yes, Mitchell Starc debuted in ODIs before he made his Test debut. Debuted in 2010. Yeah, I remember him playing in those ODIs against England, and that after the Ashes, I think he was playing in that series. I think.
Yeah.
Come to mind. Yeah, he was. Yeah, that's the first time I saw Starc.
Mitchell Starc has played against Sachin Tendulkar. If you think about it like that.
Yes, he was a part of that 2011-12 series, I think, in Australia as well. Starc. Yeah, when Tendulkar were here. Well, even Nathan Lyon, when you think about it, he got rid of Sachin Tendulkar, so not many people can claim the wicket of Tendulkar, and who's still currently playing. Maybe Jimmy Anderson before he retired. He was probably the only one, and maybe Stuart Broad as well. Come to think of it, so it just shows you how time moves on, and when you think about it that way, you're like, oh yeah, you have been playing for a long time. But what I'm trying to say is that it's very important to make sure that not everyone goes at once, because you need a bit of seniority and experience in the side, and you've got to do it gradually. When you mix in players and that, it's a delicate thing to do, but it has to be done, I suppose. So how do you think they should approach it, Jehan, when it does come to, transition and, incorporating young players into the side, but also keeping a bit of a mixture? Do you think Australia should not make the same mistake as they did all those years ago when they had that massive transition?
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? Because you still want to be playing your best side on most occasions, particularly in Test cricket. I was thinking that this particular bowling group will probably keep going with four of them together until next year's Ashes, at the very minimum. I think they can use the ODIs and the T20s to bring in younger bowlers. bowlers that are potentially going to be playing Test cricket in a few years. The likes of Spencer Johnson, possibly Xavier Bartlett. Did Riley Meredith play in that last series? I think he did.
He recently played in the Scotland series in the T20 there.
So I think those guys that are playing well in Big Bash need to come into the T20 side, then try and see if they can get into the one day side, and then the backup bowlers when Stark, Hazel, etc. are resting during one day series, they can come in and sort of try and push for their case to get into Test squads and maybe even get in the side if there's an injury. So that's how I do it from the bowling side of things. I think with the batting in the Test side, going forward in the next few years, it's pretty much going to be that batting lineup is going to be held together by Cameron Green, Marnus Labuschagne, and Travis Head. So those three, and then you want to try and get some less experienced players in and around that team when you can. And it's hard to do in Test cricket, as I said. I think because someone like Khawaja is not going to say, "Okay, I'm going to rest for a Test match here, so you can try out your younger players." He's just not going to do that. So no. I think he's going to retire soon anyway. And then they've got that issue of trying to find two openers, and then they're going to need another middle order player, or maybe even an all rounder. I don't think. In terms of Test cricket, I don't think there's any. Are there any all-rounders that the selectors have got their eyes on? I'm not sure that Aaron Hardy really fits the bill at this stage, in terms of his bowling, especially. You mentioned Will Sutherland. Is he potentially going to be a Test cricketer?
Well, you don't know until you try, I suppose. Yeah. You don't know until they're good enough, until they play. But their first-class records are okay. They're reasonable with both bat and ball. So, if you see a bit of something in them, then give them a go. That's the only way you're going to know.
Yeah. And also, I guess the Cameron Green injury, if he's out all season, that gives someone the potential to show what they can do in terms of younger batsmen. So that does give some of these guys a bit of an opportunity to come into the side and show how good they are. So yeah, I guess that's what I do going forward. But it's tough. I mean, it happens. I mean, this sort of transition can happen in a kind of cycle. Every 10, 15 years or so, I suppose. And it's hard to make that transition in a smooth fashion, is what I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's a very delicate thing to do and try and balance, experience and less experienced players and trying to get the mix right. It was sort of like the England ODI team recently in that series against Australia, which we'll talk about shortly, much later on in this discussion. But trying to balance that, for them trying to rebuild in one-day cricket, proved to be difficult. So yeah, it is a difficult thing to balance, but it's something that needs to happen anyway, because it's just the way it goes in all sports and everything. I suppose you've got to plan ahead and transition to the next phase of the team and the new generation, so to speak, coming through.
And I mean, the other thing you'd want to try and do is get the newer players in when they're at home playing the West Indies or playing Sri Lanka, where the opposition aren't going to be quite as tough. And particularly at home as well, where they know the conditions, they're going to have the crowd support, and it will be a lot more comfortable for them.
I thought Australia would have done that in series against Pakistan and the West Indies. Good opportunity. No disrespect to Pakistan and the West Indies, but their quality at the moment is not really where it should be, and it's a perfect way to blood in a new player and do that. They had an opportunity to do that. Probably a few series, I think. They had an opportunity to do that at home, to try different players over the years, but they didn't do it. Probably going forward, they may do that. And what we do know, they will probably do that this summer, as we'll talk about a bit later with Pakistan and the ODIs and T20s. They'll definitely do that because that's before the Test series. So none of the major players will be playing in that. So that's the first step in that transition, be it in ODIs and T20s, but still, you got to do that when the opportunity arises. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about things, Australia, in terms of not only the Test team transition, but ODIs and T20s as well. And we've already started to see that already. As we'll talk about a bit later with the Scotland-England series, we've already seen that already in action. So it's beginning to take effect in some areas, but over the next few years, we'll probably see that increase more and more. So, let's just see how it goes, and hopefully it's a smooth transition into the next phase for Australian cricket going forward. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our cricket discussion with Jehan on Australian cricket. I hope you enjoyed hearing Jehan and I discuss Australia's ICC Cricket World Cup 2023 campaign, the Australian summer of 2023-24, and the Australian Test team transition. Stay tuned for part 2 of our cricket discussion with Jehan on Australian cricket.